Are the devs creating problems to then offer solutions in the form of Warbonds that you can get for free, but it still costs you time? Let's go ahead and find out. On March 28th of 2024, we did a major order, I believe, and got the Quasar Canyon and, more importantly, the HMG for free, essentially, which was awesome. I wish we got that more often. HMG has ergonomics of roughly 0. Ergonomics are the ability for your player movement, or your circle reticle, where your shots actually go, to keep up with your in-game player movements. If you turn and that circle moves quickly, you have high ergonomics. If it doesn't move quickly, they're low. And 0 is extremely low. But don't worry, on June 13th of 2024, we get Viper Commando's Warbond release. This gives us peak physique as an armor passive, and that improves ergonomics by roughly 30. So hey, problem solved. You don't like using HMG, aim slow, just use peak physique. And since then, we've gotten roughly 3 weapons that have extremely low ergonomics. Amendment, when it first launched, had around 26 for a marksman rifle. Then we got Variable with Control Group, 24 ergonomics. And very recently, in the newest Warbond, we have 1-2 with 29 ergo. For a long time now, anytime you say a weapon has low ergonomics, folks just tell you to wear peak physique, which initiates a meta in which you want guns to feel good to shoot and aim. Now you have to wear armor to make that happen. It makes you wonder, at what point do we get armor to improve this way for sidearms? And then another one to improve this way for primaries. Because they can get very particular like that, in the sense that Siege Ready only affects your primary weapon's reload speed, and Gunslinger only affects sidearms. On June 12th of 2025, we get Force of Law Warbond with the armor passive Ballistic Padding. Provides 25% resistance to chest damage and explosive damage, and prevents all damage from bleeding if chest hemorrhages. At the time, folks are saying that's not very useful. Bleed damage isn't that big a deal and doesn't happen very often. But just you wait, a month later, July 15th, 10 days after my birthday, they made a change into which they increased chest injury bleed damage from 1 to 10, and chest injuries now cause more noticeable damage, as the previous value of 1 was so low it appeared to have no effect. Oddly enough, they also increased the rate at which chest bleeding would happen. Enemy attacks were consistently bleeding you almost every other or every third swipe. Very noticeable for Rupture Strain. This makes the Warbond Force of Law armor a lot more lucrative to prevent that bleed damage that would be rather annoying to deal with. And we also have the issue that's been going on for a while now, and probably even existed before, in which you can get a bleed happen to you, you stim, and it persists after the stim, which I believe was a thing beforehand, but now it's more noticeable because of the recent increase. There have been many complaints about how bleed damage is annoying to deal with, and there are bugs that make it even worse, and yet there's been no real sign they'll be changing it. Because after all, you can wear an armor to prevent it. This next section is a bit long, and it's talking about ragdolls, which are currently beyond broken. The radius in which an explosion can ragdoll you doesn't make any sense. It is absolutely cartoonish, and I don't know why it hasn't been fixed yet. To me, it feels as though they're just not focused on it, and they wanted to sell a Warbond to maybe mitigate the issue a little bit, which I find to be pretty annoying in the current state. Now, mind you, before I get into it, Warbonds can have these benefits. They can be fine for the game. They just can't be an excuse to make other stuff feel bad. So then the Warbond's more lucrative to use. That's the problem. That's where it lies. On August 20th of 2024, reduce the explosion radius of tentacles, impalers, and the ability for light rockets to ragdoll you from Narnia, essentially. Like having a larger explosive radius. The reasoning is, it should alleviate the excessive ragdolling caused by the impaler and automaton enemies using light rockets. We're still working on improving the ragdoll behavior overall. This was August 20th of 2024. On October 29th of 2024, addressing situations where explosions ragdoll players from behind cover. That's only gotten worse somehow. February 4th, 2025. Explosives can cause Helldivers hidden behind terrain to ragdoll. Apparently it's not fixed yet. And the devs comment, excessive ragdolling can cause a feeling of helplessness and frustration. You don't say. July 15th, 2025. Reduce the time it takes for Helldivers to regain control after ragdolling from 0.8 seconds to 0.5 seconds. Mind you, Everyone and their grandmama thought that was a bug in the first place. We're getting ragdolled, we're just on the ground like a dent for too long. It felt like a second at the time. That wasn't a bug. They were changing it on purpose and didn't tell anyone. And then the moment they said, oh, we nerfed it, it's because they realize it's ridiculous. And I do believe that the 0.5 seconds is still too much. If you get ragdolled and roll any distance, you're waiting through the rolling or the sliding on the terrain. And then once that's over, you then have to wait 0.5 seconds to get up again. It just feels bad. Besides the point. Actually, no. The point is that I believe that ragdolling is broken currently on purpose. Into the Unjust, October 23rd, 2025. Optimize physics by only enabling powered ragdolls when needed. What the heck is that? Is a power ragdoll you getting yeeted into Narn? You get absolutely launched? Because if it is, you broke something. Every ragdoll is a powered ragdoll. You get sent so far by every explosion. A fire hydrant can erupt and you're freaking yeeted. Same thing goes for cars, and just so many explosions have ridiculous, goofy radiuses, and they also ragdoll you more severely than they probably should. And after all said and done, they released Python Commandos on December 2nd, 2025, which has the rock-solid passive, and this gives the bearer more resistance to being knocked prone. Not immunity to all ragdolls, just more resistance. And I'm also pretty sure the way that works, if you get hit by too many ragdolls in one instance, you still get ragdolled by things that don't normally ragdoll you. So maybe there's like a threshold for it, but it's just really bad timing considering how long ragdoll explosions have been broken for, in which you get ragdolled from a larger radius, to then have an armor that is set to kind of mitigate it a little bit. Why not fix it? Because it's crazy how fast they can fix the Quasar bug, where a Quasar charges on your back, you can fire it once it's done charging instantly. That was fixed in a week. But a bug in which it affects every single faction, every single mission you do negatively, that can just be broken for months. And then after all said and done, we get an armor to try and mitigate it a little bit. I don't know. That feels bad. I just checked. It's a known issue that players get ragdoll behind terrain. That is not the main problem. The main problem is the explosion radius, which bleeds through terrain and then ragdolls you. If they just make it to where you're behind cover and you can't get ragdolled, that does not solve the issue in which enemies can miss you severely and you still get ragdolled. And to me, I'm telling you, that is intentionally by design. They want to make it to where you're afraid of rockets just in general, which affects so many things. Not just the player, but also the FRV. A rocket sends you into Narnia. Meanwhile, you crossbow a Devastator, they just kind of brunt it a little bit. They get slightly staggered. They're sitting there making it to where the game is catering towards the enemies more than it is the player. One of the more niche examples is melee weapons. We now have 9. Your elbows and hands and whatnot, 5 secondaries, and 3 support weapons. 2 you can actually equip whenever you want, and the last one's a shovel. And yet there's armor that gives you 100% more melee damage on 2 different sets. One of them gives you better ergonomics, this being peak physique. That isn't particularly helpful if your goal is to do more melee damage, considering the other gives you ragdoll resist, which will be very helpful when you're up close and personal. That isn't ideal though, because now you're pigeonholed into essentially one armor set if you're trying to not play it optimally, but just to do double the damage. And it encourages the devs to make melee weapons have atrociously low damage. And also to keep our own freaking people's elbow, the democracy's elbow, weak. We could actually be doing a bit more damage, I think, with just our own freaking elbows and feet and whatnot. But no, wear the armor instead. And this especially affects support weapons, such as the new chainsaw. There was a time where folks were saying that the flag isn't supposed to do much damage, who cares, blah, blah, blah. But we're getting more and more melee weapons. Are they all supposed to suck? And just wear an armor to make them suck less? And you can wear E-Pilates armor for 50% more melee damage, but that's half the effect. It's not particularly enticing. I say they go a little bit magical and add siphon. So if you're doing melee damage, you get healed, which to me makes sense considering you get one shot by so many enemies, and even basic enemies can 2-shot you. Who cares if you're getting a little bit of HP back? If you play your cards right, you can heal. Oh no. But hey, remember guys, we can't have too much magic in our game that has magic. These armor passives are completely fine to exist, except for the melee damage boost. That one is creatively bankrupt. But for the other ones, they're fine as long as you aren't accounting for them in a way in which you make the game essentially require them to be used fairly often. That is where problems begin to build up. And that's kind of what's happening fairly often. It's not ideal, honestly. And where does it stop? The answer is nowhere. Armor should not exist to sort of help you put band-aids on the annoyances the game offers, and instead, the game should feel good to play as is, and the armor just further improves the experience, or offers new ways to play the game. An example would be gas resist and the ability to mitigate gas damage entirely. That's kind of cool. You become the exterminator in a sense. That's a neat interaction. But making guns that have atrocious ergonomics so players are encouraged to use peak physique isn't interesting, not engaging. We don't need any more of that in the game. And I think that these three examples are kind of showcasing how the devs are creating problems and then offering a solution in wake of a Warbond armor passive. And I feel like that's pretty whack. So for New Year's, hopefully they can stop doing that and maybe address the changes that they've made to the game that just make it feel worse for no positive gain. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Thank you all for watching. And real quick, I freaking didn't start my crock pot this morning. I cooked 3 pounds of ground beef, seared it perfectly, almost. I needed a new cooktop. And I had all the fixings in there, but I didn't start the crock pot. And after about 2 hours, you do not want to risk it. Even 2 hour mark is kind of sketchy. But mine was out for 5 hours, just no power. If that happens, the meal is not worth your health. Point blank period. I was tempted to risk it because that's a lot of freaking food. But alas, I'm getting a Whataburger. Anywho, Happy New Year, and thank y'all for watching.